It's that time again, dudes, babes, and metalheads. It's time to enter the town of Silent Hill. And today, we're going to be counting down the top 5 misconceptions that many make the mistake of falling for in the franchise. So, let's pack up the car and get ready to go on a trip, because we're going to be looking at the town from my nightmares, known as Silent Hill.
I want to keep the pace, I want to figure it out. I gotta do it this way, if I don't everything's lost. Have you ever really noticed the blood shame from the tormenting pain that you realize that no one's ever been there? Have you ever looked at the violence you hide all running inside? You can't escape, it's always been there.
Number 5. The cult's influence.
If there's one thing that a lot of people hate about any game that isn't Silent Hill 2, that'd be the occultic influence in the following games.
I am the table. I am the table. I am the table. I am the table. I am the table.
But what a lot of fans tend to forget is that it isn't the protagonist's mind that creates the other world of those damn monsters, but in fact the ancient rituals performed to the town centuries before the games ever took place.
In Silent Hill 2, Mary gives the player a brief history on how the town used to be a sacred place.
You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place.
Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is meant to interpret that the land of Silent Hill was initially a spiritual place in which the Native American people who presumably conducted these rituals then played a strong part in bringing out the town's power as we know it today.
So cut to several centuries later to the cult that we came to know in the first game, and given the fact that they can sense, or at the very least aware of the town's power, they decide to use this power to bring about the birth of their god.
We'll use a magical spell.
And this is where things get interesting.
So when Alessa Gillespie is chosen to birth the cult's god due to her heightened psychic abilities, she is tormented by the demon Samael to the point where, after being burnt in the house fire because of the cult's ritual, it brings about the Otherworld, a twisted, hellish nightmare world which spawns several creatures protected by the demon Samael from Alessa's subconscious. And thanks to help from Travis Grady, Alessa then splits her soul in half, setting up the events of the first game.
So that within itself shows that without Alessa and the cult's meddling, James would probably have never had to go through such hardships as sticking his hand down a grotty looking toilet. But even then, the cult's influence is still very present within Silent Hill 2, but in a much more subtle way.
This is particularly present in the Rebirth ending, in which James decides that he can use the ancient power of the town to bring Mary back to life.
Now this within itself actually isn't too bad of a plan. Far-fetched, yeah, but not entirely stupid either, considering that this is the same series that has Aliens, Slipknot, and Sonic Youth in it. The point I'm trying to make here is that without the cult's influence in Silent Hill, there would be no Silent Hill. Because you gotta remember, it was because of the cult's ritual with Alessa Gillespie, it was how the town's power could terraform itself around later protagonists' minds. For example, if it wasn't for Silent Hill 1, we never would have gotten games like Silent Hill 2, 4, and pretty much any game in the series by this point.
Number 4. Open to interpretation.
One massive misconception that many people seem to hold is that all Silent Hill games are open to interpretation. Dude, you could totally not be more wrong, man. So one reason many people seem to bring this up is because of the alternative endings, so let me give you a history lesson, kids. The original Silent Hill game was never supposed to have a sequel, hence the reason for the alternative endings. And also the reason why I think the White Claudia plot point was abandoned in later games.
But anyway, the alternative endings in the first game were really just ways of piecing the story together in order to get the overall plot of the game.
Let me show you an example.
If you choose to save Sybil from the parasite in the amusement park boss fight, then you'll be given some information that Cheryl isn't Harry's biological daughter.
But, you know, Cheryl isn't my biological daughter.
Also, depending on your actions throughout the game, this could also lead to the conclusions of Harry either giving up upon escape and staying in the decaying Otherworld, or he escapes with Sybil and Heather. Although alternatively, if you choose to save Kaufman, you would either die from your pre-death hallucination, or you could just escape with Heather alone.
What I'm saying here is that each ending in a Silent Hill game needs to have a certain degree of plausibility. For example, in the Team Silent games, they make specific mention to elements that could come into play in certain endings. For example, in Silent Hill 2, depending on how you played James, i.e. if you didn't use that many health items, that would lead James to commit suicide in the in-water ending. Or it could come into play in certain elements in the story depending on what you do. For example, in Silent Hill 1, if you choose to save Kaufman, then that would eventually end up getting you one of the good endings. Or if you choose to save Sybil, that would either get you the bad plus or good plus ending.
These endings would also be believable given the circumstances. For example, Harry's determination to save Cheryl only to be shattered by her former self disappearing in front of him? Plausible. James's constant need to punish himself only to finally break and commit suicide under all the guilt? Plausible. Hell, even the fact that Eileen could die because of Walter's interference with the 21 Sacraments? Also plausible.
Looks like this myth is busted. The only game that really seems to denote this is Silent Hill Downpour, but that game's story is riddled with more holes than a bullet-marked corpse. As for the Team Silent games, however, with a bit of analysis, you can definitely see the predetermined paths that you could very well see the game ending as, provided it's not a joke ending. But even then...
That's where they've been taking everybody. I knew it!
Number 3. Pyramid Head.
This one's gonna get the fanbase riled up a little bit, but you know what? Screw 'em. Despite what some purists might tell you, Pyramid Head is in no way, shape or form only tied to James Sunderland.
What?
For those of you still a little bit pissed off, let me explain.
Now it's fair to assume that seeing as James was the dude who took Mary to Silent Hill, she would have wanted to experience everything about the town, going as far as to humorously drag James across the Silent Hill Historical Society to learn about the town's history.
Now the only reason I can see that fans seem to tie these two closer together than a fanfic pairing is purely for the sake that his first appearance was in Silent Hill 2, and that James used him as a manifestation for his desire to punish himself. And all that, I think is complete bogus, man.
The picture you're seeing right now is the picture you'd see when you reach the Silent Hill Historical Society, but let's truly delve into the history of this guy. Pyramid Head's image was based on an artistic interpretation of the town's executioner from the Vartiel sect of the cult, as implied by the symbolism tied to James's need to punish himself.
The interesting thing to note here is that the executioner's image was actually meant to pay homage to the Vartiel creature from Silent Hill 3 by splitting a similar yet different garb, with the hoods vaguely being in the shape of a triangle.
So presumably, after years had passed and the cult's major activity had headed underground from a society that was advancing around it, the original image of the executioners had faded from memory, which then gave us this artist's rendition based only on vague descriptions of what these figures initially looked like, giving us this.
Holy triangular prison, Batman!
So naturally, when James and Mary look at this picture learning about the executioner's role in the town, James will eventually return to Silent Hill with his plot convenient amnesia to manifest these dudes to show up all over the place until he no longer needs them.
And now we get to the main issue. Why does Alex Shepard see the Pyramid Head? Let's find out.
Given what we know of Alex's upbringing and his family's strong connection to the cult, it really wouldn't surprise me if his parents didn't give him the rundown of Religious History 101 about Silent Hill. And given the fact that Alex and his parents were never really on the best of terms, it'd be no surprise that they'd be teaching him about the town's punisher, i.e. the executioner.
So here, it'd be equally plausible for Alex to associate the Pyramid Head as a punisher for his parents, just as James sees him as a punisher for himself. So despite having different objectives, both characters do have perfectly valid reasons for manifesting the Pyramid Head as the Punisher.
Whoops, wrong punisher. Sorry, dude. So instead of leaving us with this little dude.
Well, even then, Alex might not be the only one who can see the Pyramid Head, because it was heavily implied that Alex's father, Adam Shepard, was using the Pyramid Head as a punisher for himself because he felt a lot of guilt for sacrificing his kids to the cult. So for those of you who still think that Pyramid Head is tied only to James Sunderland, you gotta remember one thing. James could have easily created him based on what he learned at the Historical Society, but Alex could have just as easily created him based on his teachings and bitterness for his parents' favoritism of Josh over himself.
But I think we all know the real reason why Pyramid Head was in Silent Hill Homecoming. Number 2. The Other World.
Now this never really became an issue until the Silent Hill movie came out in 2006, where it was heavily implied that the town of Silent Hill inhabits 4 different dimensions.
And the 4 dimensions are the real world, the other world, fog world, and nowhere.
Now seeing as the movie is non-canon, this doesn't apply to the games, but I do still see a lot of new fans being tripped up by this, so let me clear this up for you.
In the games, Silent Hill doesn't have 4 planes of reality separated from each other, but rather they all exist in the same singularity.
Now you're probably wondering how the grungy looking otherworld can exist in the same place as your normal everyday town that you never bat an eyelash to. There is a damn good counter-argument for this.
As I mentioned earlier, Silent Hill was, and still is, a town that packs a load of spiritual energy, man. And when that power was tapped into by Alessa Gillespie during the cult's ritual in Silent Hill Origins, that created a terraforming effect in which the town's power projected by the demon Samael terraformed itself around Alessa and Travis's subconscious, unintentionally manifesting their innermost torment and events based upon their lives.
But I know what you're all thinking. How the hell can the otherworld exist in this reality when there are clearly no monsters around in this world? Well, there's plenty of evidence in-game to suggest a counter-argument to all this.
In Silent Hill 2, there's a memo near a dead body on Neely Street which notes that he saw some strange creatures eating some human beings, and yet his friends saw absolutely nothing.
Now this is where things get a little bit confusing, so let's take it step by step.
The power of Silent Hill after the interference by the cult's ritual has in many ways become partially sentient by selecting individuals and then terraforming its landscape based on that person's subconscious.
This would also explain the reason why a lot of locales vary from game to game.
And what I mean by that is that when a character relates a certain place to a traumatic event, then a building of similar description would then manifest itself inside the town.
I mean, really, how else are you going to explain how Silent Hill has 3 mental asylums, a radio station, a subway station, and a huge amusement park in what is supposed to be a resort town?
But to get back to the main point, the other worlds created for a specific person have also been evidenced to bleed over into another one. One such example is shown in Silent Hill 2, where James fights one of Angela's monsters called the Abstract Daddy, representing Angie's old man, Thomas Orozco. Or in Silent Hill Downpour with Anne Cunningham, where we see 2 plot points converging, where we see a young girl, representing Anne, who sees a dead boy which she assumes was killed by Murphy Pendleton.
For those of you who are still skeptical about whether or not the otherworld actually exists in this plane of reality, Silent Hill 1 pretty much confirms what I'm about to say.
What's this? Oh. Oh.
That last scene in particular shows that it isn't the fact that the nightmare is segregated to its own realm, but more like that the nightmare is slowly consuming the real world, you know, like everything around it is sort of decaying into the will of the demon. So with that said, the otherworld in the games is very much a part of reality as the resort town of Silent Hill itself, if it makes any sense.
What are you talking about?
So to put it in caveman terms...
Here, good! Napster, bad!
Oh, damn it, it's one of those running gags bleeding over into my other world again. But if I had to sum this up, the town's power chooses select individuals to perceive the creatures and symbolic locations, whereas everybody else would see it as reality, just like you or I see it. Isn't that right, Bogeyman?
Yes.
So for number 1, when I was making this list, I based it purely on elements from the games that fans either choose to ignore or have been led astray by some biased fans' preconceptions about their image of Silent Hill. Twin Perfect. So this is going to be the number 1 biggest misconception about Silent Hill.
Number 1. Alessa Gillespie.
Hell yeah, dudes, babes, and metalheads. What better way to end this video than with a chick that started it all, Alessa Gillespie. And the misconception surrounding this chick is like totally balls off the walls insane, dude. And the biggest misconception here is that Alessa Gillespie is apparently evil. When in actuality, that couldn't be further from the truth.
The only game that would really imply that Alessa is evil is Silent Hill Origins and the Silent Hill movie, but even then, that's a huge mistake on Climax Studios' part.
But then again, it was the mid-2000s, you know, that time in life when everybody had to become a try-hard badass anti-hero who listened to Linkin Park.
I mean, seriously, dude, look at that cute aggression on her face, man. Yeah, dude, looks like you've been to the Shadow the Hedgehog school of emotion. fruition.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
But much like the town of Silent Hill itself, this all ties back to the Silent Hill movie, where Christoph Gans mistakenly thought that Alessa wanted revenge on the people who burned her. However, thankfully, the movie is non-canon, so let's take a look back at what Team Silent intended Alessa's role to be.
In the first game, Harry encounters Alessa all across the town, leaving behind the seal of Metatron before suddenly fading away.
But before we get into the main issue of Alessa, we must first learn about this. This, dudes, babes, and metalheads, is the Seal of Metatron, or Metatron if you're Canadian.
If you recall when Harry first arrives in the Otherworld Elementary School, you'll remember that the seal of Metatron was carved onto the floor, and later on in the game, Dahlia then refers to this as the Mark of Samael.
Have you not seen the crest marked on the ground all over town?
So that's what I saw in the schoolyard. What does it mean?
It is the mark of Samael.
Now to those first playing the game, it'd be perfectly natural to assume that if Alessa was leaving these things behind, surely she'd be looking for vengeance upon the town by spreading the nightmare, right?
Actually, no, as the seal of Metatron was being used by Alessa to seal the town into the Otherworld so that the cult's ritual to birth the god would never come to fruition.
Because you guys, gotta remember here, man, God isn't totally not the all-powerful, all-loving, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that we know and love from religion. Think less Ronnie Dio and more Sonic.exe.
So by effectively sealing off the town from the rest of the world, Alessa condemns herself to suffer the nightmare for the rest of eternity so that the rest of the world may be spared from the god's eternal wrath.
Whoa, dude, that's totally heroic, man.
Although, considering the fact that in Silent Hill 3, Claudia tells us that the seal has less value than a Jill sandwich, chances are Alessa's plan probably would have failed anyway, but hey man, it's the thought that counts.
Heather! Use the seal! Now your stupid dream is over!
Oh, that's just a piece of junk.
Oh, what a moron! Am I right?
And those are my 5 explanations to the 5 misconceptions surrounding the Silent Hill franchise. Thank you for watching. I'm Skully, dudes, babes, and metalheads. Keep it new metal, and I am going to be playing some Silent Hill 3.